Welcome to the Virtually Speaking podcast. My name is Pete Fletcher, and joining me as usual is my good friend, Mr. John Nicholson. John, how you doing, man?
I'm doing some planning, Pete.
Planning. Okay. I'm listening. What are you planning? Another trip? You just got off vacation.
No, I'm off vacation. I'm actually taking my wife and my daughter to the airport today. They're going to Iceland, but no, I'm doing planning on the lab. So I need to rebuild the lab, and I got to reinstall everything, and there's all these different components, all these different stuff I need to plan together for this lab rebuild. And I just want to make this easy.
That's so much work, isn't it? Having to set up your networking and get all that stuff. Yeah, man, if there was only a solution, if there was only like a solution that had this aggregated software-defined like compute, storage, and networking that we have. Oh, wait a second, we do. And we got Rick Walsworth to talk about it. Hey, Rick,
nice.
How you doing, sir?
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me. Appreciate the opportunity to be back.
Yeah, absolutely. So some may recognize Rick from, obviously Rick's known all around VMware and Broadcom, but also we just did the Exploring VMware Cloud Foundation video series, and Rick was at the top of the episode, which by the way is doing great. It's like in the 450,000 views. And that's definitely, So, and it's all because of you, Rick. So we appreciate you.
Yeah, right.
No, but anybody who knows Rick knows he spends a good amount of time talking about the value of VMware Cloud Foundation, which is the topic for today. There is a new release. And Rick, you actually did a blog on VMware's site. This is a short link to it for what's new in VMware Cloud Foundation 5.2. Which is GA just as of last week. So that's definitely worth talking about. So we'd like to learn some more about that and see what the new features are.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's been well over a year in planning in terms of executing against 5.2. And what it is, it's really an opportunity to be able to bring forward some of the innovation, right? I mean, Broadcom, very publicly stated, they're going to put $2 billion worth of investment in the VCF platform over the next couple of years. And this is really kind of, I think, an outcome of what we're seeing. And it really does fit in, if you look across kind of how we're, positioning VCF out in the marketplace, it really does position very nicely against that, right? A lot of capabilities around modernizing infrastructure, allowing customers to be able to take their existing vSphere, vSAN environments and be able to import it directly into a VCF environment. That's powerful, right? And the thing is, I mean, those that have been around for a while, that's been a roadmap item for longer than I've been at VMware, and it just kept sliding to the right because it's hard. This is hard stuff to be able to get done and get it done right. But, with kind of this new focus, bringing all the engineering teams together, bringing, essentially single management organization and a single go-to-market organization, it's allowed us to be able to apply that focus and that extra engineering effort to be able to bring these capabilities in. And then, you look at the cloud experience, right? This is the whole opportunity to be able to deliver a private cloud solution on-prem that now starts to drive that cloud experience out to the consumers of the infrastructure, right? Whether it be line of business, app owners, dev teams, platform teams, they can now essentially use declarative syntax as a way to be able to essentially now start to build their own infrastructure without ever having to talk to IT. So this is really starting to move into that frictionless environment that you hear about. And then, obviously you have to be able to build around security and resilience, right? These are just non-negotiable requirements from a customer standpoint. So the ability to be able to drive, net new capabilities, live patching. Can you imagine being able to do live patches across a vSphere and a VCF environment? And then also the ability to be able to have flexible upgrades. So I think there's a lot of capabilities you'll see within 5.2 as we start to unpack it that really now have real world applications. And the bottom line is a lot of these requirements were driven through our CTABs, through our customer forums, right? We've done a lot of engagement with our customers to be able to understand what are they looking for, what do they need? And then based on that, we prioritize our roadmap as a way to be able to deliver these net new capabilities.
Yeah, I like that. I love the, it seems like it wasn't that long ago, but let's just say 5 or 6 years ago, I felt like the story for VMware was definitely all about just the modernizing the infrastructure. Like just really we really need to, virtualizing compute, then, extending, and taking over everything else and, vSAN and, virtualizing storage, and then having this full stack solution. These use cases have been sort of the mainstay for, if you will, for VMware for so long. But I do love the way it is now with this focus on these three key areas. Focusing on all of modernizing the infrastructure for sure, but really extending into that cloud consumption experience, which 5.2, I know we're going to talk about it, but there's definitely some great enhancements in that area. And then the whole security story with the ransomware. So I think it's a perfect suite. I love the fact that since this acquisition, this has been the key focus at Broadcom. It's like, focus on make this good, make this whole thing work together well. And so that's exciting. So why don't we start by going through the modernizing, right? I know there's several different topics out there, but at a high level, like what are some of the big ones that people are talking about?
Yeah, certainly. And again, some of our most highly requested features from customers, if you sit in our C tabs and whatnot, the ability to be able to import existing environments. So think about this, right? You think about, the 400,000 vSphere customers that are out there, or, the 35,000 customers that are out there with vSphere vSAN. They built out these HCI environments. And, to date, it's always been very difficult because you had to do a full migration in order to bring them in underneath the full stack management with VCF. And, so it typically requires, you got to evacuate your host. You got to be able to, migrate the workloads, off. You have to be able to, then update everything. And what VCF import does is it really brings forward this ability to be able to now non-disruptively, because I could do this in the middle of the day, right? This is non-disruptive to your production traffic. What it does is it really simplifies the ability to be able to import these environments directly in, now bring them under essentially the single management within that, and then now convert those instances into a VCF environment. And just thinking ahead to what we're going to be kind of talking about at Explore coming up, is that starts to expand. So you think about the use cases now as I can expand that beyond just kind of these simple vSphere vSAN environments, but it does allow me the ability to be able to really open up the aperture in terms of what types of solutions we can bring in there. So, from the standpoint of you can do this now with zero downtime, simplify really that whole migration process. Is really not even a migration. It's literally an import, and then we convert it into the management construct as a way to be able to do that. But then it also now gives me the ability to take advantage of the automation we've built around LCM. So now my patch management, my upgrades, they're essentially automated. So it really takes a lot of the pain out of that. And then it improves the overall system reliability. So these are some of the key points that we hear back from customers that have started to take advantage of this capability.
Yeah.
I like a couple of things about this. One of which is, it's great that if you greenfield stand up this beautiful cloud that's fully automated and fully patched and compliant and secure. But people have all this stuff that's out there. It's out there in weird places. It may not meet requirements for various reasons. There's all kinds of drift that's out there, and I've got technical debt that I need to get under control, and if all you have is this thing that has to be set up perfectly and new, and then you have to HCX could migrate it in, but I have to go through this. I'm that's cool and all, but I'm busy trying to keep my existing old stuff alive. I'm crying behind the dumpster about it here, and it's great that now it's like, okay, this can actually start helping me deal with the things that are bogging down my time, bogging down my OpEx budgets, and pull this in. And the other thing also is being able to ingest those environments and bring them in, maybe thinking more to edge sites or small environments. Often people have these various bastions for security or enclave or budgetary reasons that people went and built things that were outside of your department. But oftentimes people are trying to centralize their IT, centralize their management, centralize their managed service, play or whatever that is. And so you've got these groups that came in maybe from acquisition, maybe from other things.
Exactly.
And being able to just envelop that within, VCF and say, look, okay, now we can get some governance here. Now we can get this, maybe we'll at least be able to crawl and maybe walk, maybe we'll go run to network automation and all the fancy bells and whistles later. But it's not just about cloud. It's about cleaning up technical debt, and that day two, being able to add that stuff in, that's big. And lastly, the other thing here is if you think about this from an engineering side, it's a lot easier to build things that are greenfield only because you understand the state from the beginning. You can kind of cheat and work in some imperative workflows. when you start looking for being able to ingest an unknown state and bring that in and work with that, that shows, frankly, a resilience in the underlying platform and ability to handle drift, ability to manage that drift, moving more, to a declarative type model. It frankly gives me more confidence in the platform's ability to handle random curveballs thrown at it, rather than be this rigid cloud that was stood up in a very, known state.
Yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely.
Yeah, in addition, just the flexible networking is a big thing for customers. And of course, the extension of, we're talking NFS, VMFS. Is it a fiber channel over token ring as well, John? Do you know?
FCOTR. The FCOTR committee is evaluating the request for VCF support, but no. But the vSAN Max also being supported in here is another big one. So the extended storage options.
Yeah. vSAN Max is definitely another one that we that is on the list. Rick, everybody, I think most people may have already heard about vSAN Max, the disaggregated HCI, but why is this new for VCF?
Well, before, we just haven't allowed the ability to have disaggregated storage in there, right? And you think about a lot of the workloads, a lot of the use cases that really drive heavy storage environments, and you don't necessarily want to apply more compute to it. But because of that binding on the HCI side, in the past, we've always had to essentially grow these together. Now I can essentially have storage only nodes, or I can expand my compute nodes as a way to be able to do this. So it really avoids additional costs in terms of having to grow that out, but it gives you, so much more flexibility in terms of how I can deploy this. So yeah, this has been one of the strongest requests that we've had from customers around the ability to be able to support vSAN Max within the VCF environment.
Yeah, and this might even be more for John. John, I know you're like one of the vSAN Max guys because you're in vSAN tech marketing. But how does that work with licensing for vSAN Max and with VCF? Is it?
So this is fun. Like the original plan with vSAN Max, like full transparency, was just to go build a new SKU and have a separate SKU. In fact, we kind of pseudo announced that in Barcelona prior to the acquisition closing, and then now we're Broadcom. And Broadcom likes a bit more simplicity. And I actually like the direction we've gone. It's the existing vSAN entitlements, the existing VCF entitlements. They just let you use Max. Max is a feature. It is not a license. It is not a, there is no more vSAN standard, advanced, enterprise plus. We had all these vSAN. There's one vSAN version. And, you're entitled to it with Max. And what this does is, from a customer basis, is they can, when they're looking at their building out these large VCF environments, especially, customer may have, I have 8,000 cores. Well, you have 8 petabytes of vSAN. You can deploy it HCI. You can deploy it external. Maybe they have reasons for that. They want to segment some databases. Maybe they want to, maybe they just operationally really like 3-tier architecture. They're not feeling HCI. They have a storage team who has 3-tier for life tattooed. I don't know where
investments.
Yeah, or their storage currently is on a separate refresh cycle than compute is another reason. They want to avoid bubble gaps and buying things they don't need. All kinds of reasons. That's great. I'll actually talk more about that at my vSAN TCO session with Tom at Explore. So, but we're excited.
Nice.
Very nice. Well, I want to talk about shameless plug.
Exactly.
Shameless plug. I know you're doing several sessions. Yeah, we'll throw it up. Hey there, make sure you go to VMware Explore and register now. There's going to be a lot of great sessions. John and I are doing a session on Home Labs, which is going to be great. And we're even going to have a little bit of some VCF conversation in there, but it'll be definitely on just what people are doing with their home labs. But sticking on the topic of storage and tiers, John and Rick, there's obviously, I think most folks are aware that the original storage architecture, which is still available, is not the only choice now, right? There's the Express storage architecture that came out, I think, in vSAN 8.0, but that's now available in 5.2.
Well, actually, we started supporting ESA in 5.1. So this this is really our second big release. But what we didn't have support for stretch clusters, right? So it really just had kind of the basic configurations. But again, a lot of our customers, especially those in EMEA or those that are out across those metro distances, are using stretch clusters as a way to get more redundancy and scale out of their environments. But it was always not supported, or at least from 5.1, it was not supported. We brought that in. So now the ability to support stretch clusters using ESA kind of fills that gap in terms of the ability to be able to support these high availability environments. And it provides a lot more capabilities in terms of now I can essentially, provision this with a lot more precision in terms of where I'm placing resources out across there. And if indeed I've got a failure on one site, the failover is non-disruptive, right? Just because of the fact it is active. Active does provide the ability to fail over in real time. So again, another very highly requested feature from our CTAB and from our customers.
Yeah, for sure. And we talked about this last episode with Pete Keeler, but it's hard not to at least state the facts that, the differences between express storage architecture and the original storage architecture. I mean, just from a performance perspective and also I think what's probably overlooked sometimes is just the management perspective, just not having to have, the failure domains being smaller, but also not having to have the whole management of disk claiming and deciding which disks am I going to use for this disk group, and understanding having to be a full manager of the infrastructure as opposed to just letting that stuff happen. So I do believe that from a management, but also from a performance perspective, ESA is definitely the way to go.
It's a thing of beauty.
That's for sure. Another big one on modernization, Rick, is that we are now having support for something that's called VMware Cloud Foundation Edge. Yeah.
So we've supported Edge for some time in kind of the construct of a remote cluster, where I could take a workload domain, or I could take a set of clusters, and I can stretch those out across there. But it always required the full stack. And again, at our CTABs, listening to customer requirements. That's fine for near edge, where I have a lot of compute power, a lot of processing power. Think about those use cases where I'm running, Kubernetes for remote development teams, or I'm running, things like AI, right? AI starting to push out to those edge sites does require a lot of horsepower. But what we were hearing was that also needed the ability to support these far edge sites, where maybe I don't need all that, the networking. Maybe I don't need to have the full stack out across there. So what this really is, it's the flexible capability that allows you to be able to deploy as small or as large as you need to, all underneath single control. And what it does is, if indeed I'm running full stack, I can actually run that with an environment that could be a completely isolated, have a full stack SEC manager out across there. So it brings not only the management, but I also get the full control. So in that capability, I can essentially deploy it at a remote site. I never have to put personnel, technical personnel out at those remote sites, just because of the fact everything can also be centrally managed. Or I can start to now extend that out, and I can run, HCI nodes, where I just have, 2-node configurations with a shared witness as a way to leverage some of the capabilities that are in there to be able to support smaller configurations. So now I can go out to these far edge sites, maybe where I don't have to have the, all of the networking capabilities. I don't have to have the full management stack within it. I can now run smaller configurations. We even support single node configurations for pure compute. So, and then we consolidate all that together and then bring it back into the core data center. So the flexibility is what customers have asked for as part of this, and we've delivered it in 5.2.
Single node compute. That's definitely doesn't sound like VCF. The traditional VCF that when I think VCF.
It's no longer your dad's VCF, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, sticking on the topic of management, I know there was another big one in terms of updates. It's called Offline Depot.
Mm-hmm. Again, one of our heavy requested sites, especially when you start thinking about those customers that are in air-gapped environments, secure environments, dark sites and whatnot, they cannot, just by regulation, they cannot connect to the primary center. So what this does, this allows you now to be able to go out and support those air-gapped environments and have your own offline depot that's completely isolated from the rest of the world, completely isolated from anything else. So I can still maintain that security, but still provide that flexibility that customers look for when they're providing those upgrades. So again, this is something that, for those customers that do have these secure air-gapped environment, it does provide the ability to support this offline without having to connect into our central repository.
Okay. Is this done all inside of VLCM? The same
We obviously we use VLCM as part of this, but no, this is actually through SDC Manager, because as you're initiating these upgrade processes, SDC Manager now, rather than going back into the central site to be able to pull the code down from our repository, it actually pulls it down from a local offline depot, and then allows you to be able to do that async to the central site that we use to manage that today. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Definitely something that's, like I said, a lot of requirements we've seen, certainly in the government space, but also in a lot of the secure financial services where they do need that secure depot as a way to be able to ensure that they can maintain compliance with any regulatory requirements they have in their environment.
It's something that I used to always kind of tell customers, when we moved into this world where there were so many SaaS connected things that were required for life cycle, I was like, anytime you're going to operate in a dark side environment or operate in that air gap environment where, your update systems no longer directly talk, I'd always say you need to take whatever your OpEx budget is and multiply it by like 5, because the amount of people like running things back and forth on USB drives. And there were certain just you go back 4 or 5 years ago, there were certain lifecycle components, and not just across VMware, across the whole industry, that just didn't play nice in air gaps, to be frank.
Yeah.
And it required a lot of manual intervention and manual work. And it's good to see those SaaS-like capabilities being able to be easy to maintain on-prem and moving to that. And we've seen this larger trend of trying to deliver a public cloud-like experience, but do so in an air gap environment is really, really hard. But it is something that people want. And it's frankly, in some ways, kind of boring trying to solve air gapping operational problems. And I love that Venn diagram of like boring, hard, and things people want. And that's where this kind of feature is in a way. It doesn't sound exciting. It doesn't sound sexy, but for the people who need it, it's going to make that, that 5x or plus on their on the amount of people they have to staff and operational practices and how long it takes. It's going to help solve that. And a lot of these customers, they sometimes ended up very far behind on patching and life cycle, which goes against the entire reason they built the air gap, which was to secure the environment. Exactly. And then they end up like, you end up in air gaps and you're like, why is there a Windows 2000 server here? What's going on? Like, I don't feel safe anymore. Like,
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah. So moving off of modernizing, I know you mentioned three key use cases: modernizing, but the other one was just the cloud consumption, if you will, experience. Not only for developers but for administrators. But the big one that I saw that came out, which I think has been asked a lot, was the decoupling, if you will, of TKG from vCenter. So we should talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, this has been another highly requested feature. And you think about it, it makes sense, right? Because we've always had to tie the updates that we make to the embedded Kubernetes runtime into the vSphere vCenter releases. So that's meant I had to wait 6 months. When a new release came out, I had to wait 6 months or sometimes more, to upgrade my vCenter or vSphere systems to be able to update that TKG. Now what we can do is we can take that Kubernetes runtime and asynchronously update it. So, our commitment is that we're, really trying to deliver much more of a cloud model, right? If you look at the cloud providers, right, all the hyperscalers, within 60 days of a new release, it's now compliant and supported within the environment. So that's absolutely the model we're going to. But now I can do this on-prem, I can do this at the edge, or I can do this in any of our supported hyperscalers that we're extending VCF out into. And so what it really does now is rather than having to wait, I get much faster alignment with the downstream Kubernetes releases, right? In terms of what's available on CNCF. And so it gives you a lot more flexibility, gives your developers, your platform teams, essentially those that are consuming the service, gives them a lot more flexibility now in terms of how they can plan, deploy, and build these environments, leveraging the latest Kubernetes build.
It's often relatively easy in the infrastructure side to push updates through and get them through your cab for that only touch like infrastructure components. But when you start getting to these dev infrastructure components, stuff gets weird, and then you actually have to get app owners to sign off on things. And then that like dependency chain of signatures, goes from like, oh, I'm going to update ESXi, put a security patch in, me and 2 other people have to have a conversation, versus you want to, update the Kubernetes environment, or you want to update the infrastructure to do the Kubernetes. You're now chaining 2 different teams together and everything gets much longer. And so being able to have that differentiation, again, it's helping, move the life cycle forward, that boring hard problem. But also it's showing under the hood that engineering, muscle that's being flexed to make systems less imperative driven and more declarative driven, to where, we're no longer expecting very rigid relationships between things.
Yep.
And that's something that, like, you're seeing across the, a lot of technical debt is being paid down to accomplish that.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, and we could spend a whole hour, and we will actually be spending a full episode coming soon just on Aria. There were so many changes in this area from modernizing applications, but the decoupling of TKG was a big one. It makes perfect sense. They just came out. 5.2 is in line with Aria 8.18. Tons of updates there. Just a few here, like the full support now for the VMware Private AI solution, where it automates all the deployment of all the various components. Yep. Just not only the VMware components, but also the components from NVIDIA, the cloud components that need to be in there. So everything gets fully deployed and managed. There new dashboards, support for ESA file share, simplified networking is another one. I think we could go on but I don't want to take too much time on just talking about the Aria stuff. Are there any of those we think we should touch on, or do you want to move over to security?
Yeah, certainly, Pete. I think that's a great point, because what this is really the start of kind of changing the experience. What's that user experience, right? And prior releases, it's always been difficult to determine, all right, who owns the stand-up of infrastructure, right? It's typically infrastructure team. And so what are the consoles that they access? What are the services that they access as a way to do that? So as you're building these private clouds, you want to make sure that you're optimizing to be able to suit the requirements that they've got. But now you turn around, it's like, who's consuming infrastructure, right? It's the line of business team, it's the apps teams, your platform teams, and then eventually the developers get access to it, right? So you want to be able to make sure that those environments are really tuned to be able to address the needs that they've got for each of those capabilities. So we're really starting to move much more in that direction. And again, really targeting and focusing on what are the requirements of the infra team as they're standing it up, and make sure that we're, bringing an operational footprint and an automation capability that addresses their specific requirements. And then on the flip side, you look at the consumers, right? What do they want to do? They essentially just want to open up a cloud interface and be able to essentially use declarative syntax as a way to build infra, right? So it's a whole infra as code. Now we've actually built that in, so it's part of this cloud consumption interface that they can use as a way to be able to deploy net new infrastructure without ever having to talk to IT.
Yeah, yeah, that is the beauty of not having to do a ticket just to request your information, all your content. That's always been a big thing. Honestly, it's been such an inhibitor in the past that I know many teams in the past that have just, back in the day, would just go out and get a public cloud consumption of whether it's a lab or whether it's an instance to test this, because it's just easier. But yeah, this really gives that cloud consumption experience to developers. I love that. Moving on to security, I know I only have you for a short time, so I don't want to take too much time here. But security, there's several updates from a security and resilience perspective. Any of these you think we should touch on?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I mentioned live patching in the intro just because of the fact it has been a highly requested feature.
Yeah,
and one that now we've delivered it not only within vSphere, but across the full VCF stack. So now I have the ability to be able to patch operational systems without having to, pause those systems, without having to take them offline. So it gives you really the ability to apply patches out across there. And this is a trend you're going to see. So if you looking ahead to what we're going to talk about at Explore, this is really expanding. These capabilities are expanding beyond what we've delivered in 5.2, but now provides a much more simplified manner to be able to apply patches. And you think about it, right? If we make it simple to apply patches, it's a lot less friction, and you have to go through a lot fewer steps in order to do so. I don't understand why patch management has always been so hard, right? It's really something that's necessary in order to make sure that systems are compliant against the latest, regulatory or internal requirements you've got. So we're really trying to simplify that and essentially apply that across not only the vSphere environments you've got, but then also into the full stack VCF environments.
Yeah. That might be a better question for right, John?
Oh, jeez.
We don't punch down, Pete. We don't punch down.
I'm I'm a kidder. Yeah. What about vSAN data protection, John? I know there's been some conversation there as it pertains to VCF.
So this is a fun one, and I actually have this up in the lab, and I have a video that I need to put a narration and ship. I'll post it to Twitter this afternoon, I promise. But there will be demos of this. So this is bringing snapshot retention and management. We have these cool new snapshots that we have with vSAN ESA, but people want a scheduler. And you know what? We listen to the people, and we're shipping it. So you can do GFS. We can do immutability. There's also some really fun things of not just the data protection side, but being able to do workflows for using snapshots for other things. So like, let's say your developers say, hey, I want 5 copies of this database that's 50 terabytes. Previously, you would be like, I don't really want to clone a 50 terabyte database 5 times. Now you can just say right click, restore, do a link, create a link. It'll go create link clones for you. And so you can actually build out clones and do that for developer and copy data management workflows. It's available by API. And this is kind of fun. There's an appliance. I'll do a whole deeper dive on this at Explore. But this is helping close some of those gaps in terms of capabilities that people really want in their storage and being able to make it easy to manage natively within vSphere, which is pretty cool.
How do they use the protection groups? What's the point for that?
So you can establish common recovery time objectives. So you say like, hey, I want to snap every 15 minutes. And then, or like say every hour, and then on every 8 hours or every day, keep one roll up, and then keep a weekly or whatever type of retention. So that way, if you get hit by maybe a ransomware event or something, you'll have some local copies. And we're looking at integrating that into VLR, so we can also work through the larger recovery workflows, because obviously you'll still want ICE and other things, but to speed up those recoveries. But also it protects you from people like Pete who delete my VMs. So previously, if you had a snapshot, you deleted the VM, cool, the snapshot was deleted. Well, now there's actually an area within the inventory of this where it'll be like, okay, here's the VMs that aren't in inventory, so I can go restore that VM that Pete deleted. So Pete, stay out of my lab. You're getting read-only permissions.
Read-only permissions. Ah, man, they're immutable. Yeah, no, it makes sense. Okay, awesome. I know we're getting close on time, but I did want to touch on some of the last features. I know there's some enhancements to some of the advanced security add-ons for VCF.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, this is an area where we're seeing a ton of innovation come in, and the vDefend product is really kind of now stepping up in terms of the ability to be able to have, much more intelligence, using kind of AI within as a way to be able to look at that threat management matrix. So the intrusion detection and protection capabilities are really now coupled with some of the capabilities they brought in on network detection and response. So now you're starting to see a full front to back protection mechanism. And then you think about now the ability to tie that in with, John just mentioned VLR and the ransomware recovery. So now I can tie in our, identity and intrusion detection now with what we're using on the flip side in terms of my ransomware recovery. So it really gives you the ability to have, a full matrix of what's being brought in terms of potential threats. How do I respond to those threats? And then in the unlikely scenario that something happens, I can leverage VLR as a way to be able to recover from any intrusion that happens, whether it be malware, ransomware, whatever it is, we can now recover out against that. So super powerful tools. And again, this is an area you're going to see more investments in and, more kind of announcements around vDefend, around Explorer this year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me, the known threats to me, that's table stakes. It's great. But the unknown threats, the behavior part is, to me, I love the idea of using AI for that. It's like, why is John in my lab destroying things? This is not normal behavior. I should then therefore, kick him out. But yeah, being able to, based on behavior, manage security, I think is pretty powerful.
Yeah, exactly.
Another big one before we let you go, Rick, is, and this is one I'm actually going to be doing a session at VMware Explore on with Dave Morera, is on dual DPU support. So let's take a minute and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, certainly. And this is something we've had, again, a lot of requests for. Our early customers love the ability to be able to offload that DPU, really for the networking and security use cases. So those use cases fit very, very nicely. But the problem is that now I'm running this traffic through a DPU. What happens if the DPU fails, right? So the ability to support redundant configurations, with this DPU offload capability now provides the ability to be able to say, look, that if I lose a link, that link will now automatically fail over and provide that capability to support out across there. And again, you're showing the two use cases here, right? I can go HA, where I have that active standby capability, or if I wanted to run active, because we do have a few customers that are driving just a ton of traffic through these DPUs, I can now run a double DPU configuration, but I'm out consuming both of those paths as part of it. So it really gives you the flexibility to be able to configure it for HA, where I want that active standby failover, or I can now run it active, where I'm actually flooding both of those paths as a way to get better performance.
Yeah, to me, I love the idea of having both of those. For one, obviously, I think the part that that's overlooked on this, I think, for one, yeah, you're offloading your network traffic, and there's some reasons from a security perspective that makes perfect sense. And then, of course, being able to take advantage of these resources like GPUs and DPUs for the processing power that they actually have, this is why they make them. It makes sense. But I think the part that might get overlooked a little bit is the fact that because you're pushing all of that off to another card, you're actually saving the real compute in your host for the work that it needs to do for the applications itself, which ultimately turns into denser support for larger workloads, more workloads in your environment. Which this is not a finance conversation, but I would imagine that adds up. If you start to push these DPUs off, and you're pushing all that traffic off, and that compute power is saved for your workloads, you're going to be able to have more workloads on host, ultimately requiring less hosts in your environment.
Exactly. Yeah. So you think about, how does that now play out? So I can get more density, more workload density on my compute nodes, require fewer compute nodes. Now I don't need as much power to be able to power that. So it really starts to, look at it from a payoff standpoint, really starts to pay off.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. All right, Rick, we are definitely getting close to the top of the hour. I don't want to take too much of your time. I know for those listening, we're getting very close to VMware Explore, which is just in a couple of weeks.
Yep.
As you know, John and I will be there with the Virtually Speaking podcast. We're going to be we've got a booth again, so we're going to be interviewing customers, partners, anybody who's got a good story. We're looking forward to seeing folks. We're not coming empty-handed. We will be bringing in the swagalicious stuff, and we've also got some better swag, and I won't say what it is because I don't have enough of them because it's a little more, a little pricey. But I will say a little hint: if you're coming to Explore and you want something more than a T-shirt, you have to say, "I am profoundly dumbfounded." That's the code. If you can say that, then you will get more than a T-shirt. I promise you.
Let's see how many people come up to you guys and say, "I am profoundly dumbfounded."
Yes. That's a callback to our early days of podcasting with John, and see it. For the old folks that remember that, we'll see if we can get some visitors at Explore. Very good, Rick. Yeah, great update. As I mentioned earlier, there's a great blog on blogs.vmware.com that goes over over what's new for VMware Cloud Foundation, as well as VMware vSphere Foundation. There's a what's new on that for 5.2. As I mentioned, blogs.vmware.com/Cloud Foundation is the place to go for all content around VCF. There also is a great YouTube channel for that, which is called VMware Cloud Foundation, obviously. And that's where we're hosting the Exploring VMware Cloud Foundation series that we did. So by all means, check that out as well. Rick, Thank you so much for joining us. Any closing words?
No, I appreciate the opportunity. Again, as you said, there's a lot more that we're rolling out at Explore. So, obviously those of us that are doing all the work now's the heavy lifting in terms to get there. But again, I think on the flip side of it, those that are there or those that are watching live are really going to see some cool innovations that we're bringing forward, as well as the ability to continue to drive adoption and consumption, right? That's going to be a theme that we're going to talk a lot about, is that what does it take to be able to start to consume this infrastructure, start to bring more workloads in. So you're going to hear, not only hear from us, but there's a lot of customers that are coming there telling their stories as well, which to us is that's the best way. It's it's easy for us to do it, but hearing it directly from your peers, that's where it makes a difference.
Well said. Well said. We'll leave it at that. Rick, thanks for joining us.
All right, man. Take care. Thanks.